I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. This is going to be a doozy of an episode. I've wanted to do this topic for a long time, and I keep putting it on the back burner. I keep not wanting to address it, but we are going to take this skeleton bad boy out of the closet and address it big time. I want to talk a little bit about cancel culture in medicine. And, at first glance, that may not seem like such a big topic, right? I think sometimes when we talk about cancel culture, maybe we sit on one of two sides for it. And I want to talk about some of the nuances in the gray around cancel culture. So either, right, when you think about cancel culture, you think like, yep, I'm not putting up with this bullshit. If something's not good for me, I am out of here. And it's totally in my realm of my rights to, tell this person to F off, and I am out of here. And yes, maybe that is totally warranted under some circumstances. That's sort of the one side of cancel culture. The other side is that people are quick to cancel out of things and quick to write a scathing review about how there was no mint chocolate chip ice cream when they really wanted that. And I think what I want to accomplish today is to talk about some of the challenges we have in cancel culture with medicine and how this might be getting in the way of you actually getting better. The other thing that I want to address, and it's kind of embedded in this conversation, is the concept of health reviews and talking about, I always call it like the TripAdvisor way of consuming health and health information. And I will say, as the health and wellness industry gets more commodified, there are parts of that review process and trying to figure out, is this right for me? And we sample the population, or actually that's not true. We're not sampling the population. We're getting a very small window into what some people think about a process, a person, a healthcare avenue, and often using these to make decisions about our healthcare the same way we would use reviews about whether or not, this particular drone had a great, pixel view from above your house. We're making some healthcare decisions based on some of the same kind of information. And I want to dive in and talk a little bit about healthcare reviews as well. Because I think it will help you be a more critical reader of some of those pieces online to help you make sure that you're getting the right kind of healthcare for you. So we're going to try and tackle both of these ideas. We're going to talk about cancel culture, and we want to talk about I want to talk about reviews and reading healthcare reviews and how this could either be helping or harming, very similar to this idea of cancel culture. So the three kind of questions that I want to address today when it comes to canceling on your healthcare, and when I use the word canceling, like I'm almost saying it like in air quotes, like where we disengage with that practitioner, where we quit a particular process that we may have had started with us, or we refuse to engage or go back and see that person ever again who's on our healthcare team. That's what I mean by cancel. So maybe it's like unsubscribing from emails. Maybe it's unfollowing or blocking someone online. Maybe it's canceling all your future appointments with someone. And then maybe it gets taken to the point of like, if I'm going to cancel with them, I'm also going to try and prevent other people from working with them by writing a review. And that's why I felt like we needed to talk about reviews at the same time. So I want us to kind of ask or answer these three questions as we talk about cancel culture. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, does starting from scratch really serve me? right? So assuming that if we cancel with someone or something that we're going to start over with someone else or something else, you always have to ask yourself that question whether or not starting from scratch is really serving you. Okay, and we'll dive into that a little bit in a second. I also think we need to fairly ask ourselves the question if there's something about the process or person that we're working with that we don't understand. So perhaps our expectations are not being met, perhaps an outcome, we didn't reach like our goal or our outcome. And we have to really be willing to ask ourselves if there's something about this sort of process that maybe we didn't totally understand, and that's why we feel like we need to cancel on it. And then the third question that we're going to sort of dive into is asking about what it is about our healthcare experience that is triggering for us. Because I think if we can fairly sort of ask ourselves these three questions, and I do want to dive into all three of them, that it will help you understand if it's the right thing for you to do to cancel and start over, or whether or not there is some reward to be had in the perseverance in the process that you are currently in. And I think the timing of this episode is quite good because we often have this like new year, new me kind of approach in January, where we feel like we need to reinvent the wheel. We feel like we need to do new things, get new things, out with the old. Whereas that actually sometimes might be hurting our overall lifetime progress, especially if we haven't considered some of these questions or pieces before we cancel on some of our previous, commitment or time that we've worked with someone else. So let's start with talking about starting from scratch. And I've always found this kind of interesting in medicine where like built into diagnosis in medicine, sometimes is the concept of passing time. Sometimes is the concept of trial and error, okay? And what that means is that, let's say we're trying to figure out someone's diagnosis, right? Let's say a patient presents to us with a particular set of symptoms. There are some things that it might be more likely to be, right? If they are presenting with fatigue, for example, it's very likely that it could be from iron deficiency. That is a massive cause of fatigue. And if we look at the person's age and stage and nutrition and all of that, we might say, okay, like there is a huge percentage likelihood here that this person has iron deficiency. And then we may test that person to find out if they have iron deficiency. Then we have to wait for the tests to come back. And maybe the tests point us down a diagnostic direction and say, yep, for sure, this person has iron deficiency. But maybe the test results come back and they're fine. And we go, okay, well, now we have to move to the next most likely considerations or diagnoses that might explain this person's fatigue, right? So even just built into our understanding of patients is there is some time needed to be built into the way that we diagnose patients. We don't send patients to the lab with every single, checkbox checked. And part of that's because there's some things that it probably isn't, right? And we don't need to test for things that it isn't. But there is this like formal sort of process that we go through in medicine to try and diagnose people. And built into that is the passing of some time. We also have, when we're working with patients, sometimes needing to trial particular treatment options and let those treatment options either take effect or not take effect over a particular amount of time. And when that patient either responds really well or maybe they don't respond at all, it actually teaches us a lot about that person as a practitioner. And the patients that we work with the most intimately, where we see them, frequently, and there's a lot of discourse and conversation and troubleshooting, we get closer and closer to being right. And I think sometimes this idea of cancel culture is that, if you're not getting what you want quickly, that the person that you're working with is wrong, doesn't know what they're talking about, is failing you. And really, I think all that is that medicine has not done a great job of being transparent about what our process looks like. And I think it leaves patients feeling like nobody cares, or it leaves patients feeling like nothing is happening Whereas we probably should just do a better job as clinicians saying, hey, like if we're checking in, like if this is a PMS related issue, this treatment option takes 12 weeks to take effect. We might not see change until the third or fourth month, right? I don't know if we're always communicating that so beautifully. But the question I want you to sort of ask yourself before considering canceling on your practitioner or on your program is whether or not starting from scratch actually helps you. And I will say that, the more we work with patients and the closer we work with people, the closer we get to being right. And there's lots of, scenarios in medicine where we may not get something right the first try. We may get it half right the second try. We may refine things and we're 60% right on the third try. And yes, I know that sometimes having an absolute fresh pair of eyes on your case or a fresh perspective can sometimes feel like a very attractive thing. However, when we close the door on one scenario and start working with someone else, whether that's a trainer, whether that's a nutritionist, whether that's, a financial advisor, like I'm guessing that there are a lot of scenarios here where we sometimes think starting from scratch is the best option, whereas the commitment to learning about you and having a process with you that extends over a period of time, in some cases actually might be the best scenario. So when you're asking yourself that question, does starting from scratch really serve me? Maybe you've been with this practitioner for a long time. Maybe you've been in this program for a long time and you don't feel that sense of curiosity and commitment to better understanding you as a person. Like, sure, maybe that does require a second glance from someone else. Or maybe the solutions that you've been offered feel limited and you want a different perspective and you want a second opinion. I like that. I like that idea. And I think that that's often people connect with an integrative practitioner because they're looking for an alternate or different opinion than what's being offered to them. But usually I want to see that happen in a collaborative way where everyone is kind of at the same table having a conversation about what could happen for this one particular individual or patient versus us closing the door on someone's expertise, someone's experience with you, someone's point of view and, shutting them out and saying, well, we cancel on you. So that's one thing to think about because I think sometimes we're quick to want to start over, especially in the health and wellness industry, especially in the weight loss industry, where it's like new, better, faster programs are being offered to people. And it makes the old, boring, laborious thing that you were doing before seem like it's like second rate. Whereas for many people, where they lose all of their momentum is their lack of perseverance with their program, whatever it is, right? So if we're encouraging someone to eat the Mediterranean diet for their high blood pressure and, come New Year's Day, they get some advertisement about why they need to do the carnivore diet, and maybe they've been on their med diet for 6 weeks and they go, yeah, this isn't working anyways. And they, jump ship. They're like literally on the cusp of seeing improvement with what they're doing. And so canceling on like their previous plan and jumping ship to something brand new, you're totally missing the opportunity to see benefit. And I think the same thing happens with practitioners is that we can get so easily frustrated by the lack of progress that we're making that we jump ship or we just quit entirely because we're not, seeing the level of improvement we want. I think, I would argue that maybe there are some moments where, we actually would have a better chance of succeeding if we persevere rather than quitting. Now, I know as we're talking about this, that people always think of like really extreme examples. They're like, well, Jordan, what happens if I, was neglected? What happens if I, faced harassment? What happens if I faced racism? I mean, absolutely. Let's cancel on those situations. But what I mean is those gray moments in between. I'm not talking about like severe, aggressive, violent, risky experiences. I'm talking about that nuanced experience where you are not where you want to be and that tendency is to want to quit, right? The tendency is to want to get out and maybe try something different. That's, I think, maybe but that moment where we have to ask ourselves, like, are we actually taking a step forward to start from scratch, or are we setting ourselves up to be in this sort of perpetual newness with a program and never get to a place of mastery? I alluded to this second one a little bit when I said, is there something about the process that I don't quite understand? And I think that's an important piece to ask yourself about as well. So I use that example of like, well, what if the treatment we didn't actually expect it to work until the third or fourth month, but we didn't communicate that to you very well, right? Then certainly, like in week 2, when you feel no better, that you're certainly going to be wondering whether or not you should quit, right? Or you should cancel. I think that those process-based questions are really great questions to be able to ask your practitioner and to ask yourself to figure out if there is something about this whole process that you don't quite understand. So for example, if I prescribe something like light therapy for acne for a patient, they kind of minimum have to do it like 3 times per week at specific amounts of time. And we talk about specific wavelengths, etc. And maybe the patient interprets that to being like, okay, well, I should shoot for 3 times per week, but if I get 1, like that's better than nothing. Whereas like it's actually no, like you legit have to do it 3 times per week to see the benefit, right? So you can see how sometimes our interpretation of the solution might get in our way of doing it properly enough to see the difference or the outcome. Sometimes we don't understand that diagnostic process. And I will often meet patients when they're absolutely frustrated with their practitioner because they won't run such and such test, or they won't send me for a such and such imaging. And when I explain what that process looks like and why, right? Like, well, no, we don't just biopsy everything we find. Like there's more harm there than good. We don't jump to scenarios or diagnoses that are so low likelihood. There is a process. Or I encourage my patients to ask their practitioner. I say, ask them to help you understand their decision-making process about what treatment options are available for you. And even just reframing some of our questions to learn more about process, right? Your doctor might have a brilliant idea or reason for why they've suggested, something over something else, or something in the order that they suggested. Or maybe they have a really good reason why they're suggesting a watch and wait versus an aggressive solution right now. Just ask them what the process looks like and what does contingency planning look like and what do the next steps look like if we don't get to where we want to go. I think laying out all of those things can be a beautiful way to communicate what's to come so that when you're in the suck in between appointments or in between therapies, or when you've plateaued, right, and things are just blah, that you get it, right? That you understand that actually we need to track your nutrition for 6 to 8 weeks to understand what maintenance calories look like, or we need you to go through 3 menstrual cycles before we'll understand if this IUD spotting is going to stop, right? Like just the communication of process can help people feel more connected to their practitioner, to the process that they're working through, and can help prevent them from feeling that like itch to cancel or that things aren't working. Because I think it's about like expectation management, right? Like that's really what so much of our work in medicine actually is to help people understand what to expect. And if you're feeling like there's something about your healthcare that you don't like or that you don't see the value in or something, it's a really good time to ask, right? Like, what does this look like over 6 months? What should I expect? What role does my behavior play in the execution of this? I think it's really a valuable one. And the last thing that I would say, and this is maybe the harder one to ask, is asking yourself, what is it that's so triggering about keeping going? So let's say we're getting that itch to cancel on something, someone, a thing, a program, a plan, nutrition, right? Exercise regime. We're getting that itch to cancel. And I do think that it's worthy to look inward and ask ourselves these questions about what about this is so triggering for me, and why does it feel like the solution is that I need to like close the book on this, right? Like, what is it about this scenario that's making me so frustrated or angry that I need to quit or whatever, right? Quit working with that person, quit this program, whatever it is. And this is a hard question to ask, because I think one of the things that we need to do better, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, is helping patients feel empowered to take radical responsibility for their own health and show them strategy for how they can do that in the context of their own life. Sometimes quitting or canceling is a stopping strategy. And by stopping strategy, what I mean is that like we are really happy not like being stuck where we are, actually, because it takes a lot of inertia and a lot of growth and a lot of like uncomfortable moments for us to change. Sometimes quitting keeps us where we are, right? Sometimes we get almost a glimmer of what it would look like to not be like this. And sometimes we cancel, for reasons, we make up reasons. That person didn't like me anyways. I don't like this. It's too expensive. I don't like the parking, right? We come up with all these reasons why we need to quit, when the real reason that we're quitting might be that it's stirring something up in us. Do the women in my family act like this? Do I deserve to make this such a large part of my health? Right? These are like tough questions. Is it a stopping strategy? Is you quitting on something actually because you almost got up to the point where you were going to have to make a radical shift in how you viewed things, how you did things, where you're going to have to finally set some boundaries about things with someone? And now, like, if you stay on the path, like, it's going to get shitty for you momentarily while you're on your path to greatness. And I can think about a lot of examples, right? I think about examples where I'm working with patients on their burnout and they come up to a moment where they're like, oh my God, I have to quit my job. And then I never see them again. Or they come to the realization that their partner is sabotaging their progress because they're not on the same path as them. And then I never see them again. I can also think of examples where, we share something that is really challenging a deep-seated belief that a person has, and then we never see them again. And it's interesting because, for all the inviting, warm, empathetic, listening, patient space we create, we still can't always control how everything lands when we're working with a particular person. And so I have lost patients because I suggested that soy milk won't kill them. I have lost patients because I suggested that their intermittent fasting might not be serving them in this phase of life they're in right now. And I've always found that so fascinating because all of those examples and all of those people, they took a big risk to connect with someone and to share their health journey, and were vulnerable, but to a point. And then as soon as something came up that felt icky, right? Like, well, I've always heard that soy milk causes cancer, or I know I have to quit my job, but right now I can't even think about that. Or, I could talk to my partner about what my health goals are, but I don't feel ready for that. That all of those people stopped their own health journey. They canceled because of something that started to expose maybe what their hard but very necessary next step was actually going to be. So that part about like asking like what's triggering about it for you is like, I want you to think about like, is this actually a weird lack of progress stopping strategy that I'm using? If I jump from program to program to program, it's kind of like dating, right? Like you're just never really committing to anybody. And so you can kind of play the field. But I will say in your health, like that is not serving you, right? Not sticking something out, not connecting with someone long enough so that they can actually support you, not staying through something in the harder seasons of your life is actually probably getting in the way of you ever making any kind of real progress. You can't only do an exercise program when it isn't tax season. Or you can't only do a nutrition program when you're not teaching in the summer. It doesn't work. And so if we quit the moment that we get some kind of discomfort or our schedule gets a little bit bonkers, or when we're maybe on the verge of having to have some difficult conversations or reprioritize our life or finally tell our mom that we're not going to eat that way anymore, you don't want her to talk about your body anymore. When we come up against those difficult moments, like your choices are, I guess, to cancel or continue. And I do think that sometimes we pick the easy solution and we don't keep going. When keeping going, like not perfectly, would serve you so much better than quitting and starting over. The other thing I want you to think about when you're thinking about, like, is this triggering for me, is whether or not you do have some healthcare trauma or just trauma in general that's really influencing the way that you feel about connecting with healthcare. And I do think this is real. I think so many patients have felt dismissed and disconnected from their healthcare provider that, you know, by the 10th time around, having to explain their story for the 10th time, you know, there definitely is going to be you're going to be like gun shy to really commit and get connected with a process and a plan because you've been let down so many times before. And I've said this to patients when I'm working with them, see for like recurrent miscarriage, I'm like, well, it's brave that you're willing to even seek other solutions. But I'm sure that you're starting to feel like, you know, efforts are futile, right? Because you've tried so many things and so many times and really don't feel like you're getting anywhere. And I do think that we do have a lot of trauma around the way that we've experienced our healthcare, especially by the time patients are struggling with a chronic illness or have a chronic condition that nobody seems to be able to figure out. There's definitely a lot of like emotion around leaning in to something new, and like, how on earth are you supposed to lean in wholeheartedly when like no one's ever made you feel like you were going to make any progress before? So I definitely think that's part of it. And I think, you know, I try and be pretty open when I'm working with people on this particular issue and say, like, we got to talk about this, right? If you feel yourself shutting down while we're talking about something because it's triggering for you, like, I got to know. I really don't hold a lot of emotion around what your plan looks like, right? I don't have a lot of emotion over what we pick for you. I want it to be successful for sure, but it also has to fit with your life. And I certainly don't have any emotion around how much of it you complete between visit 1 and visit 2. Right? That's up to you. And that's really that's yours. It doesn't bother me if patients can't, do some of the things that we've talked about. That's more for us to have a troubleshooting type conversation to help you find a plan that actually does fit your needs. But I will say that when you've got some trauma around your healthcare, the quitting and canceling is a very, very simple solution. Because you don't want to get your heart broken again. And I completely understand that. But if you find that you're, bouncing around from solution to solution, the solution might actually be to look at that level of trauma and emotion that you have around your medical care to make sure that that part's being addressed. Because I think it would be pretty hard for you to lean in ever again if we haven't actually addressed that part of it. And the last little thing I wanted to talk about today as we talk about canceling. Let me back up for a sec. This isn't about like how I think you should persevere through crappy healthcare relationships. I mean, you've been around long enough to know that I am not in favor of crappy healthcare relationships for the sake of it. What I'm in favor of is you reaching your highest potential. And sometimes we get in our own way of doing that and need to have those sort of tough conversations. And one of the things I just love about podcasting is that it's a very intimate conversation where we can explore some of these topics. And you might listen and go like, no, Jordan, like that is not what's happening with me. That is not why I've signed up for my 8th weight loss program. has nothing to do with the fact that I cancel prematurely on any of these programs because I have expectations that they can't meet and I don't understand the process and I won't give it the patience or time and I use it as a stopping strategy. I mean, if you're saying that, that's fine, right? If what I want you to do is in that pursuit of us reaching our highest potential are like deeply uncomfortable moments where we have to look inside and be like, why am I upset? Why am I, I said I was going to do 3 workouts a week and the last 2 weeks I've only done 1. I'm out. Rather than us being like, I have a deep commitment to improving my health over the long haul. And sometimes that means I'm going to get challenged or my beliefs are going to have to get torn down and rebuilt with new information. Or sometimes that means the people I'm working with are going to deeply disappoint me. But I realize that being by myself or starting over or quitting is actually not going to put me further ahead. That's where I want you to go with these kind of questions you're asking yourself, because quitting and canceling because something feels uncomfortable isn't getting you where you want to be, actually. It just isn't. And so asking yourself those couple of questions like, is this a stopping strategy? Is starting from scratch really worth it, right? And I mean, if your answer at the end of reflecting on all of those things is like, yeah, like I got to quit this. This isn't working. I am not in favor of the like perseverance of something just because you said you were going to do it. Like quit. Let's find something better. But I also just want you to be able to feel safe enough to ask yourself those questions. And if the answers that you're coming up with are kind of like, oh, like, you know what? Actually, I could stick this out, or I actually need more support, not less, right? I think sometimes we quit when the answer is we need to be supported more. We need more appointments. We need more connection with our nutritionist. We need more ideas for the gym, not less. So that's what I want you to ask yourself. Those are kind of my thoughts on the cancel culture thing. And I think partly what sparked this idea for me was some of the challenges that we face with the online commodification of healthcare, because we're starting to talk about certain aspects of healthcare just like we would talk about like towels or tiles or, mint chocolate chip ice cream. And that I think sometimes we need to maybe view this slightly different, or at least be mindful of what you're reading online to make sure that the reviews and the claims that are being made are something that is truly going to support and serve you. So interestingly, in regulated healthcare professions, we actually can't do a lot about online reviews. And so let me just walk you through what the boundaries are with respect to online reviews. So I mean, if you're thinking about going out to dinner somewhere and you read the reviews, I mean, think about it for a second. Do you have the ability to, decide which reviews are valid and which reviews aren't valid? Maybe, right? You can see the person who's like seriously pissed that their chicken was cold. You can see the person who like threw up within 24 hours of going to the restaurant and they're super upset because they're pretty sure that they got food poisoning. You can see the people who felt like their waiter was rude or that it was slow. And maybe you could ask yourself the question like, well, maybe the customer was rude, or maybe they were short-staffed and that's why it was a little bit slow. Or maybe this person's expectations of their like chicken was not reasonable. I mean, maybe as you're reading those reviews, you actually can read a response from the restaurant saying, we're sorry. We really tried to make it right for you. And the 3 different chickens we brought you, you weren't satisfied with. Or maybe there's enough positive reviews that you go, hey, this one guy like super hated his chicken, but there's like 45 other reviews that loved the chicken. Like, I'm willing to give that a go. I'm willing to try that out. So when we talk about reviews for most things, there are some like built-in safety mechanisms or metrics for you to be able to try and discern what is a real and honest review on something. You can read positive reviews, you can read negative reviews. The business that you are going to go see maybe have responded to some of those reviews, and you get to kind of like read all of those things and decide what you think about it. And the restaurant may have made some like really audacious claims, like we are the absolute best chicken place in all of history. And then you can kind of read that with a little bit of a grain of salt and be like, well, they can't be the best, like in all of history. But really, if you go there and the chicken is not the best in all of history, like there's not really any harm done, right? Like, no, your life is not on the line if this chicken is good or not good. Okay, so let's flip it from a service-based industry, or even like if you bought towels and they didn't dry you as fast as they said, again, no real harm done. And maybe again, you read the reviews on the towels and someone's not, as upset with the thread count, blah, 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 right? Like you can see how, I don't want to say it's harmless, but how less harmful it is to be swayed or suckered by reviews in one direction or another. Maybe you never go to that restaurant and you're like super missing out, but nothing bad is really happening to your life because you avoided that one restaurant. Now, if we flip over to healthcare reviews, we have some inherent challenges, and this is not always something that's well known. So when you comment or when there is a review that's posted about healthcare, there's a couple things that are happening behind the scenes that are not the same as other industries, but it's not obviously clear. So for one, a regulated health professional is not allowed to ask for reviews. So if we have a most wonderful experience with a person, if we help them have a baby, if we, support them through a really grueling period of their life, we can't ask them to write a review. It's actually against our college policies. We're not actually allowed to ask people to write reviews. And so the number of positive reviews now suddenly maybe is different than the chicken restaurant who could automatically text you after you've eaten there and say, hey, did you like your chicken? Thumbs up, write us a review. We don't really have that option in healthcare. We're not allowed to ask for a review. So the number of positive reviews gets limited to the people who are so profoundly impacted that they felt like writing a review, or the people who are maybe they have a small business and they realize how valuable reviews are and they, sit down, go out of their way to write a review. But we have no mechanism for asking for reviews. If someone writes a review, as a regulated health professional, we're actually not allowed to respond to it. Because if we respond to review, that is actually compromising the confidentiality of the person who has written the review. And so we can't call them out. We can't correct them if they're wrong. We can't describe how we attempted to support them. We can't even say, we'd love to chat with you, please call the office. And so there's actually no way for us to manage negative reviews. And what that means is that some negative reviews are for people who've never actually attended the office, but you don't know. Sometimes there's a negative review for someone who is frustrated about some part of their experience at the office, and we're not allowed to clarify. So sometimes there are reviews that are posted where we have reconciled with the person, or we have reached out to that person. And because we can't do it publicly online, that repair part of the relationship process is never really documented or observed, but the negative review gets left. And I've looked at various ways of managing this as regulated healthcare professionals. And because we own a small business and because small businesses must have a Google review page, there's nothing we can actually do about it. And so the reason I bring this up, and I'm not bringing this up as like a pity party at all. I definitely took a long time. There were some various years of my life that I'm sure I lost many sleepless nights over Google reviews that we couldn't do anything about. The reason I'm trying to educate you about this is because your doctor is the same. I have a lovely doctor who's in my life, and his Google reviews are horrific, right? I have some wonderful professionals. My husband was a dentist, and he had some horrifying Google reviews. And I don't want to say that those are the kinds of things that eventually led him to leave the profession, but certainly it doesn't help people stay in a profession when there is literally zero defense against online bullying through reviews. I'm giving you this information because it lends into the conversation around cancel culture. Because how do we make decisions to cancel on someone? How do we make decisions to say, you're out, unfollow, unsubscribe, I hate you? Sometimes we're making those decisions based on things we read. Sometimes we can see, oh, there's a whole flock of people here who don't like this person. There's a whole flock of people here who are upset about a policy. And we can make decisions that actually are getting in the way of our own healing and our own process because we're being swayed by something that's actually an incredibly inaccurate representation of what the entire journey and experience actually could be for you. Think about that. Now, if it was a life or death situation going to that chicken restaurant, I would want you to read all the reviews and maybe go test it out and see what you think for yourself. But it also isn't going to hurt you if you don't go. But when we start to read reviews on products, on people, on services, and those reviews are actually skewed in a way that never accurately represent what it's like to connect, you don't get to read the review and go, oh, this person wasn't ready for change. This person has a stopping strategy that makes them cancel on the programs that they're working on before they're about to get benefit. This person has medical trauma, and they actually are going to struggle in almost every healthcare situation until they deal with it. None of those pieces come through. What you get is they didn't like the chicken. Chicken was cold and it was late. It wasn't what they expected. They've had better elsewhere. So I wanted to do this episode and talk about it because I think this is an area that is not well understood. It's not well known. I think it has the potential to harm. And this podcast for me really has been all about helping you develop the skills and knowledge and judgment to advocate for yourself for better in your healthcare. And yet there was this weird sort of uncomfortable conversation about, why are you quitting? What happens when we read these negative or positive experiences of people online that are going through healthcare processes? And I think this brings up, so if people are not a regulated healthcare professional, right? I'm regulated at the provincial level, but if people are not regulated, none of those rules apply. So when you see the holistic practitioner with 1,000 Google reviews and a glowing recommendation, they're allowed to ask, right? They're allowed to ask for them. There's lots of things that are built in. They're allowed to contact their negative people or call them out and say, well, you didn't finish the 8-week program, Joanne. So I want you to have the knowledge. I want you to have the critical appraisal and the ability to read what you read online and decide if it's really right for you or not. And make sure that if you're feeling that icky sense of feeling where you feel like you might stop on the plan or process, or you're about to make that call and something's making you stop, to stop and ask yourself, are you literally about to have a breakthrough? And that's why you're afraid to keep going. Because my guess is that keeping going is really going to be what makes the biggest difference. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.